Welcome, Matt Blumberg. He's going to take us through a really interesting architecture for running distributed data collection and data processing, right? And yeah, give it up for Matt.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Matt Blumberg. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about Charity Engine. Our agenda will be first for me to tell you a little bit about our platform, and then to talk about some use cases. And the particular focus of the use cases is not so much just raw data extraction or data collection, but learning from data, creating knowledge from data. So first, Charity Engine. We're what we call a crowdsource cloud service. We harnessed volunteered computing capacity, which we offer as a commercial cloud, and we share the revenue to charity, which is the motivation for mostly residential users to run our app to integrate their device into our network. We also donate a significant portion of our compute capacity to public interest research. We have a grant program that's now approaching 1.5 billion hours of CPU time to scientific and medical research. We're quite proud to say that includes about 200 million CPU hours to the lab of David Baker, who won a Nobel Prize this week. The network has about 1 million CPU cores, large number of GPUs, several petabytes of storage. There's some really interesting use cases around quick access to large data sets by distributing them, which I will not talk about today, but if anybody's interested in that, please flag me. As I mentioned, we aggregate resources from devices across the internet. We provision them to the users of our compute resources in standard instance type, so it looks like a regular cloud service. So you get your resources in a certain number of CPUs, certain number of RAM. Software just gets, you just give us any application you want in a Docker container or a WASM file, WebAssembly, and then you can access these resources by some quite simple interfaces. We have an API, a CLI, a web UI. You can provision and use resources by smart contract, although in all candor, no one's ever used that. We have a Wolfram language integration, so you can just call our compute resources right from your Wolfram language code as if it was on your local device, and we can read and write data from IPFS. We've more recently, that service has been running for quite some time. We've more recently built distributed crawling tools. We have obviously the distributed network of hundreds of thousands of devices. If you want it, there's a full browser at each node, which is scriptable. There's a simple endpoint, like most proxy services, and we handle all the node rotation. So it's super easy to use, and I think quite powerful crawling platform. So I want to talk to you about some use cases that focus on some of the special things you can do when you have the hybrid of computing capacity integrated with your crawling network. So the first project here is one we're doing with the CDC, the Center of Disease Control in the United States. So what we do is there's genomic sequence data that gets posted to the web every day in the form of experiments that have basically environmental samples. And what we're doing is crawling these, the sequence data from these environmental samples on a daily basis and screening each of them to search for the presence of about 100 pathogens of concern to the CDC. So breaking this down to sort of see what it looks like, we have on the web genomics data, actually metagenomics data, that are posted to public repositories. We have the genomes of 100 species of pathogens that are concerned to the CDC, and then we have our distributed computing network. So the first thing we do is we take the 100 genomes and we copy them to a large number of devices, about 50,000 devices. So each of these devices has the 100 reference genomes. And then on a daily basis, we pull down to our devices. Each device grabs an experiment with a little redundancy, a different experiment. And then we process these. So metagenomic sequence search is quite compute intensive. It's not just like a text search. But because we have CPUs at each of the IPs that are pulling down the experiments, we have the capacity to process that data. And the result is from time to time, fortunately not too often, we find a match. We find that in one of these environmental samples was one of the 100 pathogens, and this gets forwarded to the CDC, who can then call the scientists and follow up and see what was going on. Another use case of this sort involves crawling large databases of commercially available compounds. We work with scientists who have a protein that they're interested in that basically sort of step back. The general idea here is that the mechanisms of disease are at the molecular level. And so your cells are like a machine, and a disease is a malfunction, and the machine's made out of proteins. So what you want to do when you want to discover a drug is find out the protein, the part of the machine that's broken, that's involved in the malfunction. And a drug is a small intervention. It's a molecule that sticks in there and either repairs or breaks further the chain of pathology. So we work with a scientist who has a protein that they're interested in, and then we go through huge data sets of commercially available compounds as a quick first draft of finding a drug candidate. And it's similar to the use case we saw before, where we're pulling down these molecules, and we have these proteins on all the device, and then we run a simulation, which is fairly compute intensive. But because we have so many CPUs, we can search at scale, and when we find a match where the protein of interest in the simulation looks like it interacts meaningfully with the protein, then we have a starting point for drug candidate. So what you see here from these two examples is the beginning of sort of a general pattern where on the web there's files of all kinds, and we can pull these down, and our platform actually, though I was giving specific examples, is quite general. We can put any application that our compute clients deliver to us in a Docker container on all our nodes, so we can pull down these files, process them with whatever application you want, and deliver the results in the form of data products. These data products, I think in the most interesting use cases, are not the data that was on the web. It's something new. So we didn't extract knowledge, we created it, or we didn't only extract knowledge, we created it. An example of this, a category of this that we're particularly excited about is that with a little extra work, we're now able to run a wide range of LLMs and neural networks on each of the compute nodes. So we can pull data down from the web, and each page we pull down, we can process with an LLM or another neural network, again, to create a data product that's distinct from what was out there on the web. So use cases of large-scale crawls of this sort involve sentiment analysis, image identification, where you take a picture and you get a textual description to help you to work with it. In other workflows, extracting data from complicated documents, summarizing things, translating, taking web content and making vector representations, which is super useful if you want to build databases that are basically searchable in plain text or other kinds of RAG use cases. So sort of just by way of illustration, to use this service, you just submit what looks like an ordinary proxy search request, except you can, in that request, name the application or the service that you want to use. This can be one of the library of LLMs that we provide, or we can, if you deliver your model, we can, in many cases, run that. So the crawls get done through the residential browsers with all the sorts of things you might want from a crawling network. But in the stream of data coming back, we can apply these computations, these transformations or analyses. One quick thing. This is scriptable. So this means you could actually run a series of applications in a workflow in the form of an agent process, such as was described earlier today. So here's an image identification use case. This is just a screenshot of a page on Twitter, and maybe you wanted to know something about the the images that are being shared by some particular Twitter account or class of Twitter accounts or something. And you can see, well, I guess I don't really have the mouse pointer, but the crawl comes back with a description of the image as generated by an LLM. Summarization, fairly straightforward use case. This is a quite long article about the Internet Archive, and what you can get back is a summary of some designated length. I think this was 50-word summary, 2-sentence summary, something like that. By way of what that looks like scaling up, here we have a use case where we go through a preprint archive. So a lot of artificial intelligence research, and actually many domains in academia now, people put their papers into these quite centralized preprint archives before they go into journals, because it just comes out faster, and there's a lot of problems with the journal process. So it's just incredible repository of information. So on the left, you see a search of a preprint archive on the topic of artificial intelligence for a particular day. So on October 4th, there were 164 new publications on artificial intelligence. Now, nobody can read 164 articles a day, obviously. So what we did is a crawl where we go and we pull each of these articles, generate a 2-sentence summary of each one. And so every day, you get a nice, tidy report of what's going on in this field of interest at a scale that you plausibly could keep up with. And it's just sort of a template of a way of using LLMs to make the state of the world on any given day comprehensible to a person. And then, of course, in this report, you can click through if there's one or two of these things you're interested in. You can see the whole thing. This is a sentiment analysis use case. On the left is a search in Reddit for a brand, in this case, Chevy Bolt. Search for Chevy Bolt. And there's a bunch of posts where people are talking about the cars, electric vehicle, Chevy Bolt. On the right is we clicked on one of these things. And then you see a typical crawl result with a sentiment analysis, which report sentiment scores for the posts and the threads. And this makes it possible to do things like a dashboard for your product or your brand, where you can say on a daily basis, people are saying this many good things about us, this many bad things about us. And you can also do trends over time. In this case, it's pretty steady, slightly modest increase. We didn't have time to try a million examples before this talk to find one that had a dramatic result, but I suppose the Chevy people would be reasonably pleased with this. Slow news month maybe for Chevy Bolt. But anyway, that's the whirlwind tour of the general approach of trying to take information from the web, sometimes comparing different sources of information, and computationally to create new information, to learn something, discover something. So we're excited to talk to you the rest of the day and see how we can help you learn from the information that's out there in the world. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Matt. We have one or two questions come in. Can you please explain, maybe with some examples, of what exactly Charity Engine does and the business model? Who can donate compute resources? Can anyone download the app? And who can purchase the compute?
Okay, that's a lot of questions. Let me start at the beginning. Can you give those to me one at a time?
So first is just explaining what Charity Engine does and the business model.
Okay. Well, Charity Engine we describe as a crowdsourced cloud. So we aspire to be basically a cloud service. And we then also build on top of that cloud service a range of what I would call higher level services, for instance, the web crawling tools, which we have. There's also biological tools that we provide to people in science. So the business model involves in people, mostly individuals, but in increasing numbers, data centers also, running our app on their machine. And when you run our app on your computer, your laptop, your desktop at home, it allows you to lend your idle CPU time to the network. It runs in the background, so if we do our job right, once you install it, it doesn't bug you because it sort of dynamically adjusts the load on your machine and takes a secondary role to the user's primary activities on the device. So you really don't know that it's there. And so there's the value proposition to the volunteers is that we're going out selling this bundled resource as a cloud service. We're getting paid for it. The value to the volunteers is that we share our profits with charities that they care about. Oxfam, CARE, things like this. So you can just put this thing in the background and you forget it's there, but you're generating real value for charities that are out doing good work in the world.
So anybody can just come to your website?
Anybody can go to charityengine.com and sign up. We also have beginning of the seeds of a data center program where data centers can lend more capable devices and they get paid for the runtime because they're higher value devices and the amounts add up more significantly.
Makes sense. And then who can purchase this compute? Is it anybody or is it limited?
For the compute, it's basically anybody because the compute runs in a sandbox, so it's quite secure. For the proxy, there's a KYC process, so we want to know who's using the network resources.
And the example you gave about summarized articles, etc., is that something you've done? Is there human feedback in the loop that does some kind of verification? Somebody was just asking about that.
So that's a prototype which we just finished up like 2 days ago. So there aren't any commercial users of that. As designed, it's automated, so it would be on the customers to, if they want to do human in the loop. It depends on the use case, how important that is.
And how do you ensure data privacy and security when using volunteered computing resources?
Well, the data is encrypted at rest and in transit. In principle, some amount of the data is, the data may be accessible in memory during the computation. So basically, if the data is super high privacy data, like medical records, people should not run it on Charity Engine. But in other cases, because the data is sharded over so many devices around the world and is reasonably protected, it's a reasonable proposition.
Cool. Any questions from the audience? Do we have one over here? Yep.
Hey, thanks for the talk. That was really fascinating. I just had a question about like running user scripts. Do you do any sort of like bot detection kind of things to make sure you aren't arbitrarily running like a bot network? Or I imagine that's in your like KYC process, but just kind of curious if you guys do sort of any like review to make sure you're not unknowingly doing bad things, right?
So this is why we have KYC for the people using those network services. So we tend to know them and what they're about, what they're doing. There's some automated things that prevent certain categories of abuse like DDoS and stuff like that. And then other things really are a matter of us just keeping an eye on things and being in touch with people. So I guess it's a mix, is what I would say.
Thank you.
Great. Any last questions before we wrap up? No, I think it's just before lunch anyway. So
okay.
Listen, thanks very much, Matt. And we'll be back here at 2 p.m. for the legal panel.
Thank you.